Today I'm going to talk about the 4 elements of sleep. My name is Rune Frantzen. I'm a medical doctor and a sleep expert. The reason why we want to talk about the 4 elements of sleep is that if we deconstruct sleep, we can have a better understanding of what actually happens when you sleep, and therefore also a better understanding of what goes wrong when you either can't sleep or sleep too much. The 4 elements of sleep are the sleep pressure, the circadian rhythm, the ultradian rhythm, also known as the sleep cycles, and then sleep induction, which is the ability to let go and fall asleep. I will go through each of these in this video. Process S, or the homeostatic sleep process, is the sleep pressure. That is the ability for the body to accumulate a need for sleep after it has been awake for a certain amount of time. You have to understand this as an hourglass function, where the body accumulates a need for sleep, and with this increased accumulation, you increase the ability to sleep. It's actually a pretty simple system. It's accumulation of adenosine in a part of the brain. The adenosine in the brain accumulates in the VLPO, which is primitive part of the brain. It works as an hourglass, meaning that when you're awake, you accumulate the need for sleep. And when you sleep, you clear this adenosine and therefore regain the ability to be awake. In normal humans, it takes about 1 hour to clear the adenosine that is built up during 2 hours of being awake. If you don't have this 1-to-2 ratio, you wind up either sleeping more or less. If you have a 1-to-1 ratio, which is an extreme case, which some patients with hypersomnia have, it'll take you 12 hours to clear 12 hours, meaning that you're awake for 12 hours and sleep for 12 hours. The sleep pressure is an important part of the treatment of insomnia, because you need to understand that if you're not tired enough, if you haven't accumulated enough sleep pressure, you won't be able to sleep. The circadian rhythm is the second element. The circadian rhythm is actually the first element of sleep that was developed during when we were just critters on the bottom of the ocean. This is the variation on when there's sun and when there's no sun. For primitive animals, that was the only difference that was. During the daytime you were active, and during the nighttime you're passive. And humans also have this ability or this propensity to be asleep during the night and awake during the day. Other animals have this inverted. If you take a bat, for instance, that's active in the nighttime and passive in the daytime. And for instance, a mouse, they're more active at dusk and at dawn, and then sleep more during the middle of the day and the middle of the night. Even though some humans think that they're a nighttime creature, that's not really the case. They might be habituated, or they might want to be more awake during the night. But if you look at all the basic genes, the expression of genes has a circadian variation, and we are meant to be a daytime animal. Unless you're a vampire, then it's obviously inversed, but they have other problems. But humans are daytime animals. We are more awake during the day than we are during the night, and this cannot be inverted. It's also this circadian rhythm that controls a lot of the functions in the body. We can see the different types of hormones are secreted in different times of the day. We can see the bowel movements are synchronized to the daytime rhythm. So the tendency to sleep is accumulated during the nighttime, but we actually have a bit of a dip just after lunch, where people do have a tendency to take a small nap. That's what's called siesta in Southern Europe. Some cultures use it, some cultures don't. But we do have a bit of a trough in the tendency to be awake just after lunch, and some people use this, some people don't use this. The third element is the ultradian rhythm, also known as the sleep cycle. These are small cycles that are around 1.5 hours during which sleep goes through the different stages. It starts out where you have light sleep, then deeper sleep, and is ended by REM sleep. After you've had a complete sleep cycle, there's a tendency to wake up, and that's why we wake up during the night. If you have some other problems that might result in that being the time that you go up to go to the bathroom. But the basic tendency is that we have these cycles of around 1.5 hours, and we have a tendency to wake up between these. Of course, later in the night, when the sleep pressure has been terminated to a certain extent, these tendencies to wake up at the end of a sleep cycle will, of course, increase. So why does the brain have this around 1.5 hour cycle? Well, nobody knows, but it seems to be pretty hardwired into how the brain functions. It does seem that there's a tendency for less clearance of metabolites if we don't have this cycle. The funny thing is that this cycle is actually the same that we see in how long people can concentrate about stuff. And that's why we have, in the school system, we have the longest you can have is a double lesson. And after that, you need to take a break. That's actually the same around 1.5 hour cycle. And we can also see that people can't just concentrate for a very long time. The 1.5 hours seems to be a natural limit, and then we need to take a break. The fourth element of sleep is the sleep induction. That's the ability to let go. That's actually the most difficult, and that's the one that people have the hardest time, especially when they have the insomnia. How to understand this sleep induction? You have to understand it as an old-time seesaw with children on it. One is dominated as sleep and one is dominated as awake. That's the extremes. And the brain is not really good at being in between one and the other. It's actually made with centers in the brain that inhibit each other, so one is always dominant. There are a couple of diseases where this system is too unstable. The instance of this is narcolepsy, where you have a lack of hypocretin. And when you have this, you shift between states too easily, and your system is too unstable. If you have a very unstable system, you fall asleep when nobody's talking to you, or when you're in the bathroom. And that's a problem for the patients with narcolepsy. They don't actually have more sleep than the rest of us. They just don't have the control that we have. The problem with insomnia is actually the reverse. They're too stable. And of course you're stable if you're stressed. And a lot of people say that they're not really stressed about anything, but what they actually have is sleep anxiety. They've developed a problem with their sleep, and because they have a problem with their sleep, they're anxious. And when you're anxious, you can't fall asleep. You can't let go. And that's why it's important to understand the other elements of sleep if you want to treat or if you want to affect this system. But the sleep induction is the ability for the body to let go, stop to focus. When you've stopped focusing on anything, the body has the ability to shift into another program, which is sleep. If you have problems with sleep, it's important to understand all four elements and work with all four elements to re-establish good sleep. That's actually the basis of regular sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is that you can't go to bed during the daytime if you have problems sleeping during the night. And it's also the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. That actually works more on the sleep induction side, where regular sleep hygiene works more on the other elements. But if you have problems sleeping, it's important to understand the four elements of sleep, because the four elements of sleep are the basis of understanding both sleep hygiene and cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia.